You have a limited time to read. Should you spend it on a couple of series or a wider range of standalones? Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan and welcome to Words in Time. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing the pros and cons of the series versus the standalone. I also have some pretty big news to announce for the channel, which I'll reveal later in the video, but for now, let's get into the arguments for the standalone. An obvious difference between the two is that it's less of a time commitment to read a single book than it is to read multiple books. And that can make a difference, especially when you're trying out maybe a new author or a new genre or subgenre, and you're not quite sure whether you're going to like it. If a friend comes to you and says, "Hey, you should try this book. It's about a time-traveling pirate. It's only 450 pages. You might think, well, that sounds pretty good. I'll give that a try. Whereas if a friend comes to you and says, "Hey, you should try this book. It's about a time-traveling pirate. It's book 1 of 15. You might think to yourself, damn, that pirate really gets around. I'm not sure I have the same amount of free time that he does. And that connects to my second point for standalones, that they're easier to pitch to other people. If there's one thing that readers enjoy more than reading a good book, it's getting other people to read that book. So if we take that same hypothetical, but this time you're the friend pitching the book, it's going to be easier to get them to read it, and now you have someone else that you can either gush over it with or get into a heated debate over. Next, standalones come in a range of lengths, but most books are under around 1,000 pages long, which does put a bit of a constraint on the author on what can be included in that story. That's not to say that every standalone has great pacing, but in theory, that should reduce bloat. It means there's less time to get sidetracked by less interesting aspects of the story, and anything that is essential to the story can't get delayed to another book in the series because there is only one. Another advantage of reading standalones is that you get to consume a buffet of different genres and subgenres. When adding standalones to your TBR, you can grab a plate and you can say, oh yeah, I'll try some cyberpunk, or add in a little space opera, maybe sprinkle a little First Contact on there as well. Now, you do get multiple genres within a single series, but if you're someone that enjoys variety, you can definitely try the most amount of genres and subgenres by reading a range of standalones. So I'm a sci-fi fan, and a lot of sci-fi books are driven by the concepts or the ideas, and those are less likely to drag or feel repetitive within a standalone. I love premises like, what if you were stuck in a time loop? Or what if I cloned myself 1,000 times? But there's only so much to explore within a single concept. Authors can write multiple exciting ideas or concepts into a book or series. Cixin Liu's Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy is an amazing example of a series that is just jam-packed, full of amazing ideas. But for me, when it comes to those premise-based stories, those high concepts, I think they often land the best for me when confined to a standalone. And lastly, any narrative thread that an author plans to resolve must be resolved by the end of the book in a standalone. The same applies to the final book in a series, but within a series from book to book, the author might leave you on a cliffhanger or just drop a storyline entirely to be picked back up later in the series. With a standalone, you're never left with that feeling of next time on Time Traveling Pirate Man. So that was my case for the standalone. What are my arguments for the series? Well, to start, you have more time to develop your characters. You can put them in more unique situations in order for us to see them change or grow. And there's a bit of a similar difference between film and television. There certainly are iconic film characters, but if Breaking Bad was a film instead of a TV show, would I really have believed the transition of Walter White from high school teacher to drug kingpin within the space of 2 hours? Possibly if it was well done, but over the course of 5 seasons, we really got to explore and understand the nuances of that character. The same way by book 4 in the Sun Eater series, Hadrian Marlowe is no longer the same character that we were introduced to in book 1. Next, if you're someone that enjoys learning about different environments, different species, different social systems, then there's a lot more time to explore those and fully build out that world within a series. It is possible to build an interesting world within a standalone. For example, 1984 has a very distinct setting, but when I think about my favorite universes, I'm always drawn to something like Hyperion, because the imagery is just so vivid because of the amount of time that I spent there and the world that Dan Simmons was able to build over the course of 4 books. And that ties into my next advantage, which is the ability to write on a larger scale. you have more time to write more storylines, more locations, explore more themes, and hopefully you're able to use that in order to develop a wider variety of more intricate narrative threads, and then throughout the course of the series, hopefully successfully weave those together in a satisfying way. Another advantage of the series is the ability to build the emotional stakes. I ran a few sprint races as a kid, and afterwards, I was pretty thirsty. I never ran a marathon, but I imagine at the end of a marathon, that nice cold drink would taste even better. And what I mean by that is the emotional weight of seeing your favorite character either killed or finally reunited with their family, or whatever the possible outcomes are, after all the trials and tribulations of 5 books or 10 books, is bound to land harder than just the one book. And lastly, series may be better for people that know what they like. Earlier I made the comparison of buffet-style reading, but not everyone wants to try a little bit of this and a little bit of that. They just want the steak. And they don't want the 8 ounce or the 12 ounce, they want the 16 ounce. If you read the first book in a series and you love it, there's no better feeling than knowing there's a bunch more for you to love. So those are some of the pros and cons, in my opinion, of these series and standalone. Just quickly, before I let you know my final verdict on which I prefer, I want to let you guys know that I have just launched my Discord server and Patreon memberships. If you want to find other people to discuss sci-fi books with, then definitely check out the link to the Discord server in the description. And if you want to support the channel as well, then feel free to follow the Patreon link and discover some of the awesome benefits, like getting to vote on my TBR, as well as joining video hangouts with myself and other patrons. So what is my final verdict on the debate between series and standalones? Well, I actually went through all of my 5-star books and counted how many of them were series and how many of them were standalones. And the final result was actually very close. Standalones came out ahead with just a very narrow lead. But I think what the kicker for me was that a number of the books that were technically series could also kind of act as standalones. For example, 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke is a part of a series, but Clarke wrote the sequel to that book 14 years later, and the first book can definitely stand on its own. So when I took out those kinds of books, the lead for standalones did become much larger. Obviously, there are good and bad examples of both, and I think it comes down to personal preference. As a sci-fi fan that enjoys concept-driven narratives, I think that preference lends itself to standalones. However, if you're someone that primarily looks for character development and world building, then I could definitely see why you would lean towards series. So there you go. I enjoy a mix of both, but if you make me choose, I'm team standalone. Let me know which side you are on in the comments. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. If you really enjoyed the video, feel free to check out the Discord server and the Patreon memberships, and you can find more sci-fi content over here.